Good evening. I'm Katiana Ballantyne. I'm the counselor for Ward 7. Thank you so much for coming this evening. I believe also in the audience is Counselor at Large Mary Jo Rossetti. Is she, maybe she's, oh, she's right there. Sorry, right in front of me. Are there any other elected officials here? I don't believe so. We do also have the captain from the West substation, Jim Donovan, who is here. If you've never had a chance to chat with him, he grew up here. He's got a great sense of humor. Visit him in the office in Teal Square. So I wanted to share a few words that were given to me by Alice Donovan's family. Alice Donovan is the woman who was killed by a reckless driver in the crosswalk here in front of the school. So if you would indulge me, I would like to share the words. So Alice said, "I'd like the memory of me to be a happy one. I'd like to leave an afterglow of smiles when life is done. I'd like to leave an echo whispering softly down the ways of happy times and laughing times and bright sunny days. I'd like the tears of those who grieve to dry before the sun of happy memories that I leave when life is done. Your life was love and labor, your love for your family true. You did your best for all of us. We will always remember you." Thank you. So just a couple of things just to see who's in the audience. If this is your first meeting about the Powder House Boulevard infrastructure project, would you raise your hand? Wonderful, thank you for coming. If you've been to more than one meeting, would you raise your hand? If you've written or emailed comments to me and to the other counselors or the city, the transportation, raise your hand. Wonderful. Raise your hand if you walk around Dilboy Stadium, the Parkway, you know. Great. If you use a bike or walk or use public transit to commute to work, would you raise your hand? If you use your car to commute to work, would you raise your hand? Okay. So I'm here to listen. There are issues about public safety. There are issues about parking. There are issues about trying to make Powder House Boulevard a better road for everybody. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your ideas and thoughts this evening. And I'm going to pass the microphone over to Ona.
Thank you. Welcome. My name is Ona Ferguson. I'm a Somerville resident. I have lived right around here for about 35 of my years. I'm very happy to be here. I work at a place called the Consensus Building Institute based in Alewife, and we facilitate topics of significant public interest like this one. So my job here tonight is to help you all have really great conversation. We are going to run this meeting not like a kind of typical public meeting, which you might have been to, where people are just coming up to a microphone, because of the, say, 100 people in the room, you know, that's comfortable for maybe 10 or 15 of you, and other people have things they'd like to share too, who wouldn't be able to share them in that format. So the agenda for the next 2 hours is as follows. We're going to talk about the pedestrian issues and safety measures that are getting implemented, so everyone can have an update on that piece first. And then we're going to shift into the bike safety and sort of change options and ideas. And you'll hear about some ideas that the city is considering, and then we're going to have you talk in small groups to each other about what those different options mean. We're hoping you're not just sitting at a table with people who you know and love already, but maybe with some people who you don't know as well, or who might have different views from you. And then we're going to come back together and talk about kind of big picture, what did you hear? You should each have in your hands 3 things. One is the meeting agenda. The second is a handout with some options on it. We're going to go through that. You don't need to look at it yet, but you should have one because we're going to ask you to turn it in at the end of the night with your thoughts. Idea being we want to hear from everyone who's in the room. And then you also should have a map that's just slightly larger in case you want to look at it. So those are the materials. Let me think. I want to acknowledge we have some very young people in the room, which is wonderful. That's awesome. Thank you all for coming out. People who live in this neighborhood range in age from, 1 day old to probably 100 and plus. So that's important. The city staff are here tonight to hear your thoughts and input. And so we're going to we've sort of designed the conversation really carefully. We really want to hear from you. In terms of just kind of ground rules and how we're going to be tonight in the room. First I want to note there are a bunch of people standing. There are a ton of chairs over here. You can just take one down and put it wherever you want. So if you want to stand, that's fine. If you want to be comfortable, do what you need to do to be comfortable. The same goes for everybody in the room. If you need to stand up because, hey, it's the middle of the week and you're tired and that'll help you focus, do what you need to do. Please do turn off your cell phones if you have not already. And I will note that the light sort of doorway over there is where the bathrooms are, and they are now open for anyone who encountered that barrier before. So let's see. Obviously, there's a lot of interest on this subject. We all know that this many people don't show up at something if it doesn't matter. Given that, and also that I'm feeling a little shaky after Katyana's introduction and those words to start off our meeting, I would ask that in the world we live in today, we each are one person, and how you show up tonight, how I show up tonight, with each of you and with each other, is how the world becomes. So just to sort of think about how you want to be and to try to speak about the things that matter to you, rather than sort of putting anything on anyone else. That will be really helpful. We are here together. We're friends and neighbors. We're all going to see each other a lot more. And it's exciting. And we want to get as many good ideas and thoughts and perspectives out as possible. So with that, I'm going to have Katyana give a few more minutes on just perspective from the last few years of how we come to be in the room tonight together. And then I'm going to have Adam from the city staff and the transportation department talk about where this meeting sits in a planning process. And then we're going to jump into the safety stuff.
Okay, thank you. So I've been an elected official for about 5 years now, and about 6 months into this, parents started talking to me about the safety of crossing the crosswalk in front of the school. And so they said, they had a solution, and they said, how do we get a raised bed? We need to slow the traffic down here in front of the school. And so I said, well, we'll figure it out. And the city said, well, you need to let everybody know on Powder House Boulevard, or try to collect signatures, that they would be for this. So the section, I think of Powder House Boulevard, I should frame this. I think of Powder House Boulevard as 3 neighborhoods in a way, from the Rotary to Curtis, from Curtis to Packard, from Packard to Curtis, and then Curtis to North Street. So the parents were in this part of the neighborhood, and they went out door knocking, and they collected signatures, and the neighbors said, yes, there's a speeding problem here. And then I submitted them to the city. I had the police check the speed of the traffic. I had the school department come out, and everybody agreed, okay, the traffic speeds certainly on this part of the boulevard. So the city came back to us and said, okay, we'll do something, but the first thing we need to do is, before we repave, the infrastructure work, the water mains, the sewer mains, the gas connections, they have to be, since we're digging up the road, let's do that first. So 2 years ago, they started at the rotary end, and they dug up the road. They invested a lot in upgrading our infrastructure, which was over 100 years old and is mandated by the state that needs to be done. That has been worked on. So it ceased, the work ceased, so the paving wasn't done last year. The work ceased over the winter, and unfortunately then on February 8th, Allison was crossing the crosswalk and she was killed by a reckless driver. There was a tremendous amount of outpouring. There was a tremendous amount of, we need to do something here. We know they're speeding. We know that there's paving to be done, but then it's sort of like after the paving is done, the infrastructure work, the paving, I'm going to throw a percentage out there, but Adam can correct me, but it's like 95% of the cost of what's going on, and it takes up the most amount of time. They said that they, what else can we do? And there was the flex posts that were put up to test. People do slow down there. There was extra speed limit signs on that side. So as people are coming off Powder House Boulevard, that they know they need to slow down, and there's also a speed limit sign that monitors what your speed is. So they did that, and then there's been other analysis work on what could be options that could slow the speed down. So we are in a test phase right now. We are in a information collecting phase right now. I would say I think most of the feedback that I've received is that the city was responsive to hear that there's a problem here, that we need to improve the safety, and we're still collecting information to try to figure out what is the final solution. And Adam will talk to you about what some of the interim measures that we're doing now for Plan A to see if a four-way stop at Curtis and Powder House Boulevard will work. There's three raised raised beds to slow traffic down as it gets to the school. And I just wanted to tell you, if you zoom out, okay, there's problems at Powder House Rotary. And in a few years' time, there's going to be a new intersection at the end of Powder House Boulevard and Alewife Brook Parkey. And there's going to be potentially another 315 housing units in the public housing project. There were 3 years of community meetings around that. This portion of the neighborhood many of them came to those community meetings. So there are other things going on here and coming up in the future. So as you're thinking of ideas of how to improve the safety on Powder House Boulevard, please remember that there is the rotary that's going to be worked on. There is the other end of Powder House Boulevard that is going to be worked on. And I know the families at this end of Powder House Boulevard who started this whole process and are sort of at the tail, they're the ones that have been scheduled last in terms of the speed dampening measures, have provided a lot of good input and a lot of patience during this whole process. You all have been awesome. I think it's wonderful that you're all here. I'm certainly here to listen to everything you have to say, and your ideas are really, really important. So thank you. And I'm here all evening, so if you have any questions that you want to direct to me, I'm happy to go out into the hall and talk to you too. Thanks.
With that, Adam Polinsky, sorry, I haven't actually said it out loud, is going to present on these safety measures.
Thank you, Ona. Thank you, Katiana. Hey, everybody. My name is Adam Polinsky. I'm the city's transportation analyst in the Department of Strategic Planning and Community Development. We do all of the transportation planning work in the city, a lot of implementation on that side, anything related to cars, bikes, pedestrians, buses, trains, you name it, Green Line Extension, Powder House Boulevard, Broadway, all the major streets in the city. We have a hand in all of that and how everyone gets around. So in terms of what to expect tonight, everyone should have an agenda. We're going to sort of split this meeting up into two sections, just because we have there's a specific focus, as Katiana mentioned, on pedestrian safety and making sure that the Winter Hill Neighborhood School, oh, that's better, right? Making sure that the Winter Hill Neighborhood School is as safe as possible, that cars are obeying the laws and going slowly, and that everyone feels safe walking around the school, because that... Oh, it's too much? Better?
No, you said Winter Hill, it's West Somerville.
Oh. Powder House. Thank you. I don't know. All right. Well, the whole city. But we're here for Powder House tonight. So we have a pedestrian piece, and then we have a bicycle piece as well. So for the first part of the meeting here, we're going to focus on pedestrian measures around the West Somerville Neighborhood School. I'm sorry. One thing I want to note is that the pedestrian piece is mostly going to be updates, but in terms of decisions, nothing has been made tonight. So if you're coming here to react to a proposal that the city has made, we're not there. This is just a listening session. We want to make sure that we hear from everyone. We want to hear your concerns, and we want to gather as much input as possible before any decisions get made tonight. So I just wanted to sort of set the stage with that and make sure that we're all on the same page there as we go forward. And that is specifically in regards to the bike piece, but I did think it was important to mention that up front. So just to expand on the history lesson that Katiana had given us a few minutes ago, the work on Powder House Boulevard first started with Eversource back in spring of 2015. They've been working on a gas main replacement for it was about 3 years total, 4 years total worth of work. As that work was starting to wrap up, the city came back in, and we also had a water main valve rehabilitation and replacement project. And as that work was finishing up, we came in and we also are going to have been and will continue to reconstruct the sidewalks, and then ultimately will repave the section that is still outstanding, which is from between Mason and Burnham over to Alewife Brook Parkway. So when you look at the numbers, there's already been a substantial amount of investment in Powder House Boulevard, which is great. It's an aging street. It's been around for a long time, and there was a lot of crumbling infrastructure that really needed to be addressed. It's $5.6 million so far between the city and Eversource, and that's a chunk of change for the city, and it's really important that the city has made those investments. The one thing that hasn't really been addressed through these projects is surface treatments and how people get about. This is all maintenance work, really bringing things up to snuff and to standard, but there hasn't been any really special focus paid to how people move around, and that's what we're trying to address now as we near the end of this project. In terms of timeline and wrapping up the sidewalk reconstruction and repaving work, as you can see, if you looked outside, the city's contractor, DNR, is finishing up the sidewalk reconstruction work between the school here and North Street. There will be a bump out that will be over at North Street. For those of you who don't know what that is, the sidewalk is going to be extended where it turns around the corner. So if you're taking a right from North Street, heading down to Powder House Boulevard, and then you take a right towards Alewife Brook Parkway, that will be bigger, so that prevents cars from going as quickly around that turn and shortens the crossing distance for pedestrians as well. So all of that work is expected to be completed in June, at which point the contractor will come back in and they will repave the street, the rest of the street that is still in poor condition. That will be, like I said, from about Mason Burnham all the way over to Ale White Brook Parkway. There's also been some community outreach that's been going on throughout this process. As Katiana mentioned, there had been a petition that was submitted calling for some additional safety measures, particularly in regards to the school and pedestrian safety. There was a meeting back in May of 2017 when this work was first going on to sort of talk through things and discuss potential options in terms of restriping. There was a meeting about a year later to have a more in-depth discussion on traffic calming at the West Somerville Neighborhood School. And then more recently, as the cities have put together a traffic safety plan for Powder House Boulevard, we had a meeting back in March, as well as a couple of smaller office hour style meetings in April, and that sort of brings us to today. So for those of you that have been interested in the traffic safety plan and are concerned about safety, particularly for pedestrians on Powder House Boulevard, I have a few things that I want to update everyone on. In terms of enforcement, police enforcement of speeding vehicles on Powder House Boulevard is ongoing. I've seen officers out there when I've been walking around the neighborhood, which is great, and that's going to continue on an ongoing basis. Police are also monitoring conditions on Raymond Ave during school pickup and drop-off hours as well to make sure that everyone's staying safe during school pickup and drop-off. Some signage has been added to the boulevard, in-street pedestrian signs. Those little yellow guys in the crosswalks are out on all of the crosswalks that cross Powder House Boulevard. Lighting has been adjusted. It's been turned up out here outside the school, so at night it's a little bit clearer. There's more visibility. It actually makes signs more reflective when there's more light like that shining on it. So we've been responsive to requests in that regards. Pruning needs will also be monitored on an ongoing basis if any tree limbs are getting in the way of signs. And then we'll also be putting in additional radar feedback signs, which are those ones that flash and say your speed is and tell you to slow down over on the Mason and Burnham section. Mason, Burnham, Leonard. So I wasn't sure exactly where this would land, but we actually do have rubber speed tables outside of the school as of this morning. So we're excited. We tried to turn these around as quickly as we could. It seems like they're working well so far. We may need to make adjustments, so I'm going to ask you guys to bear with us. This isn't the type of treatment I don't think anyone else sees in Somerville, because I'm 99% sure we don't have this anywhere else in Somerville. But we knew we had to be responsive to the community's needs here, and that people really felt it was important to slow cars down, and we recognized that, and we agreed with you. So we're going to monitor this. We're going to see how well it works, see if there are any negative consequences that maybe we didn't anticipate. It's an iterative process, so we're gonna continue to work with us. We want you guys to reach out to us if you recognize any issues as these continue to play out. There will be repaving that will need to happen at one point, so when that happens, we will have to remove those, and then the speed tables will go back in after repaving is complete. The one thing that I should note is that these are a temporary material, so they do need to get pulled up in the winter, because if not, plows will rip them up. So to mitigate that, we're going to be trying to put in more permanent interventions in the meantime. However, if that doesn't happen, we will be putting in additional flex posts at those locations to try and keep speeds down over the winter, and then if not, put them back in next spring, put in permanent measures. And sorry, I should be clear, we do plan to put them in back in next spring as well.
I think you have a question over here.
Oh, sir. Sure.
I've seen the tables out on the boulevard. They're not striped like the ones in the picture.
No.
And they're hazardous right now. You're not going to be able to see them at night. Someone's going to get really, it's bad the way it is. There are too many of them in the short section. They're not marked. There's no signs. They're not striped. They need to, if you're going to use them, you've got to use them at minimally what you have in that picture. And those are not like that right now.
Yes, so the arrows that are on them right now are a little bit small, and we recognize that, so we probably will be putting up some additional signage.
In the daytime, you can't see them.
Yes, so we will be putting up some additional signage to try and address that.
The point is they need to be striped so people that are driving know that it's there and they don't bottom out their car as they're driving along.
Right, right.
They're striping them today, though. I mean, it's in front of my house, so, you
Well, I
know.
hope so, because
Yeah, they
I
are
was bottomed out my
striping.
car, I wasn't going that fast. They're awfully high, and they're not well indicated, and I think that's a problem.
Thank you. Yes, and we can put up signage and we can add some additional striping. So in terms of additional measures, the city is also planning to implement a four-way stop at Curtis Street. So we will be either putting the signals on flash, if that's possible. When they go into the cabinet, we'll know if they can put it on red flashing at all four ways. If not, they'll bag those signals. We will put up stop signs for all four corners at that point, and then we'll be testing out that for 60 to 90 days and see how that works. So if that doesn't happen next Friday, it'll probably be happening the following Friday.
So they take those lights down? They're gonna take the lights down?
Should we wait?
I think when you're saying what they're putting in, if you can say what happens to what's there now, right? That's what you're asking.
Right, the lights come
Like
down.
what's there now?
So yeah, the lights won't come down at this point. We'll either be just covering them or putting them on red flash.
Yeah, because I think if we do that, you're gonna find out they're big trucks. Because I live on Powder House Blvd, 4 houses in, back of that. They put the stop signs there. They work good. The problem with it is during rush hour, I can't get out. I can't get out of my driveway. They stop at the stop sign going either way, they gun the gas, and they're going, I'm 4 houses from the stop sign, and they're going 30 by the time. So, in the traffic coming this way at night, there's 30, 40 cars. I mean, I want to sit on my porch, I got cars, we never had it before. Now you got a stop sign, you see why it's there. Maybe
I wanna ask you to-
the people that live there.
Hold that. Let's let Adam get through what's planned so we can all hear that, and then we'll do some kind of clarifying questions after that. I'm going to let him get through. He just has a few more slides. It's not that much more, so that we all can hear, and then we'll check on some clarifying questions.
So again, this is a pilot, so we're going to be testing it. If things go poorly and it's determined that the signal really should be there after all, we can always just unbag those signals and take down the stop signs. So.
What is the metric for being good or bad? What is your core metric?
So safety is one, queuing is another. If there are cars backing up in every direction and it's backing up into other intersections and causing safety concerns there, that would be one thing that we need to address. If, God forbid, the number of crashes increases, that would obviously be something that we would have to look at. So general safety, if pedestrians aren't feeling comfortable and we're noticing that people are taking a long time to cross the street, those would be a few of the measures that we would be looking at, as well as taking into account resident feedback. So the last piece here is the improvements specifically at the school, some of the longer term improvements. So what the city has proposed is to make the speed tables that have been put out here permanent in the long term. We'll need to go through a design process to make sure that that happens. And then as that's going on, we'll also be working to design a signal at the school. So we have a rapid flashing beacon out there right now, which has, it flashes yellow when someone presses the button, and then you can cross the street, and cars are expected to stop. However, we've gotten feedback that people don't always stop. So a hawk signal actually turns red, flashes yellow first and then turns red, and that would be a true stop condition for people to be able to cross more safely there. If the rubber speed tables that we put out and the four-way stop are both successful, we will move forward on that measure. However, if we find that the speed tables aren't working that well for whatever reason, if the four-way stop pilot isn't working, we're going to go back, we're going to reassess things, and then we're probably going to look at potentially putting in a raised crossing, a raised table out here at the school, which would be the alternative to that. And for those of you that don't know, I just explained a little bit, but the hawk signal for drivers, when the pedestrian presses the button, it's dark when people aren't in the crosswalk, but then it flashes yellow, and then turns red, and then the pedestrian gets the walk signal. After they're done crossing, the signal will then toggle between the left and right bulbs up top there, which means that drivers can go when they know that it's clear. So it's just a little bit, an easier way for people to go when they know that there isn't anyone in the crosswalk. So the last piece I wanted to touch on, the pedestrian improvements and just sort of the longer term improvements to the boulevard. Just want to make sure everyone that is aware that we're also continuing to think about Powder House Circle and then Powder House over at Alewife Brook Parkway and Route 16, so either end of the boulevard. We are still planning to implement some interim, short-term style interventions down at the circle to narrow things down to one lane, as well as continue to work with the developers over in Clarendon Hill to try and really rethink what the intersection over at Alewife Brook Parkway and Powder House Boulevard looks like. That's a longer term project. That's a little bit more far off, but something that we mentioned in our traffic safety plan. I want to make sure people are still aware of it.
Thank you. All right, so as a reminder, we are hoping to spend a lot of this meeting with you having a chance to give input and thinking about the piece that we're going to talk about after this, but we want to do a bunch of clarifying questions now to make sure that we can understand what's happening and what the city is planning, and then you can comment on it more in writing or via phone or email or all of that. So I see 2 hands here, and then I'll look around the room and take others. In the back, yes. And can we get a microphone? Can we run a mic? We have.
Oh, here, we can.
Yes.
There was one. We can use this one, and I'll.
Brian, will you run a mic? Or somebody? George wants to say something. George, go to questions. Okay, and I also want to note there are like a good 20 of you standing in the back. I know this is like the scary zone, but there are a bunch of stools up here people are welcome to, and there are a whole ton of chairs over here, and feel free to just make your way across. I know it's a little uncomfortable, but like find your way to a spot that you're happy with for the evening as best you are able. Perfect, good job. Perfect. All right, with that, oh good. Brian, can you walk around to people? That's great.
Okay. My name is Judy Jacobs. I live in Ward 7. Okay, you can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. My name is Judy Jacobs. I live in Ward 7, and one question I have is, could you please explain a little bit more about what will happen with Alewife when it dovetails into Alewife, okay, down the street here? Because I don't think a lot of people understand that you're proposing a 4-lane state highway, or whatever we call this, state road, to reduce it to 2 lanes of traffic in order to then put in your bike lanes one on each side. Do I have that right?
So I take your question. I don't know the answer. Somebody here does.
Okay, that's my question.
Sure. I'm sorry. I was outside handing out papers when you were doing introductions, so I didn't get a chance to say hello. My name is George Proakis. I am the director of the Strategic Planning and Community Development Office here in the city of Somerville, and happy to try my best to answer that question. So there's a combined project at the end past North Street between Alewife Brook Parkway and North Street, and the way all of that intersection comes together. And we weren't ready with plans to show you of that proposal tonight. But basically the essence of what it does is it tries to turn that intersection into more of an intersection and less of a rotary. And it establishes, it slows down the way that traffic turns and pulls into Powder House Boulevard, so they don't feel as if they're pulling into a exit ramp off a highway as they're sort of coming into your neighborhood. I am not aware of a specific bike lane detail over there. I think that the bike lane conversation there is a part of the bigger question in the second part of this meeting. So as you look at the bike lane strategy, we can look at it as it relates to that entire intersection. It does maintain the 2 lanes in each direction on the parkway itself, so it's not reducing traffic for people who are just going by. It's really designed more to make sure that those who are choosing to turn off onto Powder House Boulevard are taking a more traditional turn into a neighborhood rather than swinging kind of up and around through a rotary, and it creates a little extra green space in the process as well. So that's the basics.
Yes, hand here.
Hi, I have a comment and a question. So my question is, what are the pros and cons on on Curtis and Powder House Boulevard of the 4-way stop versus the traffic light? I don't understand that. And then I have a comment. So I'll hold this.
Sure. So the main benefit of a four-way stop is that it makes it easier for pedestrians to cross. Pedestrians no longer have to wait 30 seconds to a minute to get the walk signal. Pedestrians automatically have the right of way. So pedestrians can approach the crosswalk. You can cross right away. It also doesn't, it no longer creates that incentive for people to have a green light as they approach the intersection and try to gun it through. So everyone has to stop. You have to come, if you're driving a car, you approach the intersection, you stop, you look around, and then you proceed through the intersection. So it makes it a little bit more comfortable, and it's just generally a better pedestrian experience from that perspective.
It definitely, a green light, especially a green light turning yellow, encourages people to speed up. The four-way stop will always encourage people to slow down. I want to stress, as Adam said, this is a 60 to 90-day test. If at the end of the 60 to 90 days, we all are at the conclusion that it's not a good idea, all we got to do is take the bags back off the lights and go back exactly to the way we are now. So this is a test to see how this works, and that's all we're doing at this point.
Thank you. My comment is that at the end of Raymond Avenue, the sign used to prohibit anyone from turning onto the street between 7 and 9 and 2 and 3. At some point, a sticker went up that says, "Except police." And it's chaos when the police come to their job and they're coming down the wrong way when parents are dropping off. It's been an ongoing problem. It's not, and they're in private cars. They're not in police cars. I'd like to see that sign on both sides of the street, and no exceptions. It's not safe for people to be coming down the street when people are trying to drop off their kids. That's my request.
So what we're trying to do now is clarifying questions to make sure we understand what exactly is happening. Brian, can you go to the fellow in the blue at the back? Thank you. And then I'll come over this way, over that way more.
So my name is Leron Bitone. I have 2 children here at the West, and I live on Broadway in Ward 7. I want to thank Adam for the clarifying presentation. I thought it was great, and also there's a lot more clarity on the option selection after the four-way stop is implemented. I guess my question is about timing. Allison Donovan was killed in February, and these speed tables, I think we have 1 day of evidence. There may be some traffic calming, but they're going to be pulled up in November. Can you clarify the implementation schedule for the hawk signal versus the schedule for the raised table, if that's the selected option?
Yeah, sure. So those are definitely items that are going to be tough to implement this year because those, unlike rubber speed tables, which are pretty straightforward, they're predetermined design. We just need to decide where to put them, have them manufactured, shipped, and then installed, which is about a 6 to 8 week timeline, which is what you guys have seen over the course of the last couple of months here. That a hawk signal, in particular raised table, those are things that both require a lot more extensive design. We have to have engineering surveys conducted. We have to have a professional firm come in and make spot adjustments and really make sure that drainage is going to continue to work. If there's a big mast arm that's going to be overhanging the street, we need to make sure that's designed correctly. So that's probably a 2 to 3 month process. We also have to work on contracting, which is a very boring but very important part of the job, and that will also play a factor in that as well. So it's unlikely, I would say, that anything happens this year. I don't want to make any promises on that front. So what we would try to do is when these tables are removed in November, put some flex posts out there to try and keep speeds down. It's not the best solution, I recognize that. But unfortunately, these more permanent interventions, there's just more thought and there's more time that needs to go into them.
Yes, Brian, I'm going to point you in the back over there, the fellow holding the white piece of paper. Yes.
So I'm Jake Weisberg, 32 Powder House. I particularly wanted to echo something that I heard from over there a little while ago about slowing traffic between Packard Avenue and the Powder House Rotary. Specifically, when people come down that hill, hit the fresh pavement there, going past our house, people are often going far in excess of the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. And we actually had 3 accidents right outside the house in a month last fall. So are there any specific plans for implementing traffic slowing, anything to slow traffic in that area as well?
Yeah, so one thing that we're looking at right now is adding, as I mentioned in the presentation there, those speed limit signs that show you how fast you're going. We're planning on putting those on either side of the crosswalks down there as you're approaching that section. Yes, so those signs are shown to have an effect. It doesn't necessarily last a long time, but what we're doing is we're also thinking about a long period of time. So what we could do and what we've been investigating is putting up signs that are actually movable, so we could move them to different locations, put them back, and then sort of refresh people's hesitancy to exceed the speed limit and sort of take it at that angle of attack. There are also some additional markings that you can put under crosswalks that we've experimented with in other parts of the city, where the crosswalks are red backed, and then we have some tan bump outs as well. Those locations already have true sidewalk bump outs, so we could just paint it red to increase visibility there. And then whatever we end up deciding on for the final restriping plan will most likely narrow the travel lanes, which also encourages people to go slower. So the combination of those things we're hoping will have an effect on speed on that section.
I see 3 hands in a row here, and then we're going to come over to the 2 I sit here. So let's start at the front. Lauren, in the stripes. Brian.
I have 2 questions. Is the 60 to 90 day period going to be reflective since the students are gone?
That's a great question.
I want to say we are, my colleague Toby here, the
I asked
question
if
was,
the 60 to 90 day time when they're going to test that intersection with a stop sign is going to be reflective of actual traffic because the students are gone.
Thank you. And I want to say we are taking notes up here, and we are going to be compiling all of these issues and questions and sharing that back with you also. Sorry, do you have a...
So if I could... Okay, hello, okay. So in the 2+ years that we had community meetings about Clarendon Hill, the project teams or developer team that is working on that did a lot of traffic studies. So the city actually has the data, the development team has the data from the traffic consultants on different times of year, basically from September through June. I had the exact same question. I asked the same thing. School's going to close down. You know, it's 90 days. Is it going to be reflective? So I just wanted to say is there has been a lot of data collected on traffic for this area. So they felt that they would be able to blend, you know, look at all the data and be able to come up with a good recommendation.
Okay.
June 13, it's a Thursday.
And then yellow isn't typically a stop color. So why can't those flashing lights be red? Because that is a stop color. I never understand why they're yellow, because yellow doesn't usually mean stop.
Sure. So with to get to a red light, the standard practice in engineering is to have a yellow light first to warn people that the red is coming, so that they have 2-3 seconds to know, okay, something's going to be red, something's going to be red, and then it turns red. If it just flashes red and someone's approaching the crosswalk and a pedestrian assumes that they can go, that's a potentially hazardous situation. What the hawk signal would do is that addresses that by first flashing yellow, turning solid yellow, and then turning red, more like a standard light, so that drivers know what to expect, and then pedestrians can also get the same level of service that they would expect from that. So it would attempt to address that.
All right, I see. We're going to take 2 hands here and then 2 hands over here. And then I know many of you are here, especially also for the second part of the meeting. So we're going to move to that, knowing this is going to keep feeling like you haven't figured everything out, and I apologize for that. So, Brian, I want to take the 2 hands in the back over there. There's a woman who has had her hand up, I think, for a while, and then right next to her. And for those of you who are speaking, if you can be this is for clarifying questions, so if you can be very concise in your question, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so a follow-up on at the school here and the change over to a four-way stop sign. So are there going to be extra crossing guards here for the children? Because I know in the past when I've brought my kids to school, there's one crossing guard. So if you and she was having a tough time with some of the drivers because when you're coming from Powder House here, people would come around the car that's turning left onto Curtis and would try to go. And a couple of people almost got clipped there. So I'd like to ask if there are going to be more crossing guards, and if you're going to implement it now, can you wait 3 weeks until school gets out? And can you have a crossing guard there during the summer? Is that an option?
At this time, we were not planning on having any additional crossing guards. However, I think that's a really good point and something that we should look into. This isn't something that needs to happen next week necessarily. So maybe there actually could be a benefit to waiting until school is out, testing things over the summer when traffic is down a little bit to sort of ease into things, and then sort of using September as more of a true case study to see how things go. So this is actually really good feedback and something that I think we're going to think more seriously about over the course of the next couple of weeks. So thank you.
Yes, the fellow right next to her. You have a microphone coming so everyone can hear you, sir.
I generally don't need one.
But apparently for the video, Katiana says we're being videoed, so.
On your light out here turning red, which I suggested several meetings ago, flashing yellow doesn't mean stop. I was up on Broadway at the bank, and I happened to notice when the light turns red for pedestrians, you have a speaker telling the pedestrian they can cross the street. Just because the pedestrian has the right of way, don't mean they should be crossing right away, give the cars a chance to stop. You can't take on a 2,000-pound car and win. Common sense tells you stop at the corner, give the cars a chance to stop, and then cross the street.
Okay. And am I right that the lights start yellow and turn red, right? That's where we're talking about. It's changing. Okay, there are a couple of hands over here, and then we're going to move on to the next subject. And I think they were further back. Brian, do you know? I think maybe the woman with the ponytail, is that in the black? Oh, that is not a woman with a ponytail. All right.
Hello, my name's Jim Monagle. I'm on Ossipee Road, which runs parallel to the Boulevard. I wanted to know, do your metrics take into account the push of traffic onto the neighboring side streets? For our street, in the morning, there's a clear shot. If they can get on Ware Street, go straight down Ossipee all the way to Mason. And we do have a do not enter sign, but it really isn't paid attention to. So I can look out my kitchen window at the Boulevard, traffic's backed up, and now I know the traffic's flowing down my street because people are avoiding multiple lights. And the tough part is there's children on our street walking to this school. There are children coming from Teal Square across those streets to the Boulevard, and there are no crossing guards. Thank God for most cases they're with parents or grandparents as they make their way. So does your metrics take into account the push onto other streets?
Not specifically, no, it doesn't. However, I would recommend that if you do see issues when the pilot's implemented, you reach out to the city, and then we can go out and we can measure things on a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, we just don't have the staff or the manpower to monitor all of the side streets while this is happening, but we can go out and measure things on a case-by-case basis, certainly. So I would recommend that you reach out to the city if you do notice.
But you mean call 311, or how are they reaching out to the city?
I would start with a 311 request, and if things don't get to the right person, we also have a transportation@somervillema.gov email as well.
Yes, the woman in the black t-shirt.
Yes, sure. My question is, at one point, I've been at several meetings. And one question that I have is, I thought what was occurring in front of the school with the crosswalk was the whole thing was going to be raised. And now it seems like there's now a discussion that there is going to be a raised table prior, a raised table afterwards. has that somehow changed, that they're now implementing something prior to the crosswalk, after the crosswalk, and not creating this large, it was supposed to be like a huge bump that they were going to make like more like a triangular shape for the children so they can cross, and it was one large thing, not two things that I think.
So I think there was a lot of discussion around that, and I think there was a lot of interest from neighbors in having that treatment. To the best of my knowledge, I wasn't directly involved in those conversations, but I don't think the city ever committed to doing that. I think we said we would look into it, and when we developed the traffic safety plan in March, we were trying to look at the causes and the true concerns, which are, one, speeding, and two, being able to cross the street safely. And we felt that we could achieve that same effect having the speed tables where they're located now, with the combination of the hawk signal as well. So that's sort of how we landed on that. However, like I said, if we run into any issues and the four-way stop at Curtis and the speed tables that are out there now don't really work the way that we were hoping they will, we're going to revisit the raised intersection conversation.
Yeah, just a final comment, because Adam was not here on some of those earlier meetings. There was a lot of discussion about, and Liron, you can probably chime in on this, but the idea of having a raised speed bed right in front of the school. There was discussion about, is that the best way to slow traffic down? Because you actually want to slow the traffic down before it gets to the front of the school. So that's why the city is testing out 2 raised speed beds on this side and 1 on that side. And the idea is the traffic will slow down before you even get to the crosswalk. Again, and then the 4-way stop. If it doesn't work, they don't find the data, then they're going to look at Plan B, which was maybe you have a very long speed bump. But my understanding from the consultants, the traffic consultants, is this was sort of considered the best start option, is to try to slow the traffic down before you get to the school.
I just want to reiterate the councilor's point here. We're trying this intervention because we think it actually will be more effective. And we're trying it with temporary bumps because if it's not more effective, we still can put that table in. The table is a great idea in many ways, but we think it might actually be too late to actually slow traffic down as they approach the intersection, and that's why we're trying this. So that's the idea, and the beauty of doing it with temporary stuff is if we find that it's not doing what we want to do, we can still put that table there. It's still an intervention that can work. So we do a lot of this these days. A lot of transportation departments are doing things where you can do simpler interventions to test them and see whether or not they work, and then we can make them permanent if they work. So we can make the bumps permanent if they work. If it doesn't work, we can try something else. That way we don't put permanent bumps in and then have to rip them out, or a permanent table in and find out that traffic is slowing down too late. So that's where we are at this point.
Thank you, George. Thanks, everyone. We're going to move to the next portion of the meeting. I know for some of you that's probably frustrating. Hopefully for many of you, you want to hear the next part, and so it's okay because we all have places to be after this. If you have further questions or comments on the pedestrian piece, feel free to jot them down or ask them. This sheet you should all have is a handout. We'd like you to turn it in when you leave. On this, what is the second, not the page with all the different options, there's a square in the bottom right corner. That's for anything you want to share. And if you would like a response to something, please put your name and email or phone number, and I'm going to guess that the city will get back to you if you have questions. So with that, we are going to transition to the next portion of the meeting. So for this piece, the city has a plan, it's doing its work, it's on track, trying some things out, trying to get the best possible approach. The part we're about to talk about is a couple steps behind. So they haven't developed a plan yet. It's not decided, okay? This is why they're coming to all of you. So what we're gonna do is Adam's gonna go through some thinking about bikes, about parking, about pros and cons of different ideas. And we'll do clarifying questions to make sure that the concepts are clear. And then we're gonna have you talk to each other, and then we'll come back together. So with that.
All right, back to me.
the city has had a number of infrastructure projects that have been going on. Started with Eversource and their gas main work, has moved up to city doing some water main work, and now we're coming back through repairing all the sidewalks, the trees planting strip, and then we have repaved a piece of the boulevard, but we're repaving the rest in July. There's been some community discussion that's been going on. The city's reached out. We've discussed traffic calming, striping options, and then a traffic safety plan as well. And that has brought us to where we are today, which is how is the city going to restripe the street when the boulevard is completely repaved? And there's a lot that goes into that decision. That is something that we need to hear from all of you about. What are your concerns? What are your needs? There's also a large piece that has to do with, what are some of Somerville's goals as a city and where are we trying to move? Summer Vision is one of those major goals. We have gone to the city, did it way back in 2010. We're going through a new Summer Vision process now to really try and figure out what the community wants and what we're trying to build together as a neighborhood, as individual neighborhoods, as a city, and what are we trying to accomplish? Because whether we like it or not, Somerville is growing, new development is coming in, and things need to change, and then the status quo no longer even becomes the status quo. The city needs to continue to make improvements to iterate and to make this the community that we all want to live in. So Summer Vision is sort of the overarching principle. There's also a couple of action plans that the city is in the process of developing or has just developed. Climate Forward Plan has come out recently. The city is working towards developing actionable goals towards reducing our carbon footprint and making Somerville a more livable community from that perspective. We have also been working on a Vision Zero action plan, and for those of you who don't know what Vision Zero is, it's the goal of eliminating all traffic fatalities and serious injuries on Somerville streets. Thankfully, that number is already generally pretty low for Somerville. However, even one is too many in this case, and we feel that it's important to do everything in our power to get that number down to zero as well. So that's sort of the context behind some of the things that the city's thinking about. However, like I said, it's input from all of you, and really hearing everyone's concerns that is going to play the major role in this decision. So I want to walk everyone through what the options are that we have right now. Option A is what Powder House Boulevard was before any of this construction started, which is a lane of parking on either side, a travel lane in either direction, and then just a double yellow center line that went up and down the street in addition to crosswalks where crosswalks are warranted. And this condition generally encourages faster driving, and it also doesn't provide any dedicated space for people that choose to bike up and down the boulevard.
For people who aren't used to looking at this, can you just orient them and show them?
Sure, that's a great point. So this is a website that's pretty common in transportation planning called Street Mix that allows you to sort of build a cross section, and we can basically imagine that we've taken the street. So imagine you're coming from the Rotary and you're walking towards Packard Ave. There's houses, there's the sidewalk, and then the tree planting strip, and then you have a parking lane here, travel lanes in either direction, which are currently 13 feet wide. The standard travel lane width is either 10 or 11 feet. This is wider than a highway travel lane right now. Another parking lane, and then your other sidewalk. However, in recent years, the city's begun to investigate whether improved street design plans can be implemented when a street undergoes repaving. We like to think about, think about things as a clean slate. We don't have to remove any markings. We get a fresh coat of pavement, and then we can think about if there are any improvements that can be made. Option B was born out of this process. It includes a bike lane in one direction right here. So if you're traveling from the Rotary to Packard Ave, the bike lane would be heading towards Packard Ave between the rightmost travel lane and a lane of parked cars. And then coming in the other direction would just be Sharrows and bikes would travel in the same lane as motor vehicles, so they would.
Two things, people don't know what sharrows are, and you have also in your handout, one side of it is talking about these same things, so you can kind of cross-reference.
Yeah, you can reference that as well. And a sharrow is what you have probably seen out in some of the streets in Somerville. It's a bike symbol with two chevrons above it, two arrows. And that isn't a dedicated bicycle facility. It just sort of guides cyclists as to where they should be on the roadway, as well as informs vehicle drivers that there could be bike traffic there, and to sort of make them more alert on that front.
So, excuse me, you said that that's looking at us coming from the rotary, right? Is it?
Yeah, so actually, oh yeah, good point. Powder House Circle. But it actually doesn't matter. So it is going towards Packard Ave from either direction. The bike lane, the bike lane would be on the right side here. So it actually switches at Packard Ave.
So Adam, if I may just clarify, knowing you could, so what this does is it doesn't take any parking out. It just narrows the travel lanes a little bit, which will slow traffic down a little bit because you're narrowing the travel lanes a little bit, and takes some of that roadway that had been used for travel lanes and basically puts it into a bike lane. You can't get one in each direction doing this. You can get one in one direction. So the theory was put it in the direction where you're kind of running more uphill and allow the downhill bikes to sort of flow with traffic in the other direction. And so that's why it switches at the midpoint. But that's what this does, so that, to be clear, this, which is option B on your form, doesn't change the parking situation. It just takes some of that travel lane width that was pretty wide in option A and puts it towards the bike facility.
Yes, thank you, George.
Sure.
There are a couple of additional options that are also under consideration. So one of these that was put forth by the Somerville Bicycle Committee is a two-way bike lane on one side of the street. So in this case, if we're looking from Powder House Circle towards Packard Ave, again, we'll use that as the example. It would be on the Tufts Field side. It would be a 10-foot wide bike lane with bikes able to travel in both directions. There would be a 3-foot buffer with some flex posts, and then cars would be able to park next to that. And then there would be the two travel lanes as well. The trade-off with this option is that it would require converting one of the parking lanes into a bike lane to allow for the adequate width for all of those users.
How wide are the travel lanes?
The travel lanes are 10 feet wide in this case, which is what we would aim for on Powder House, on a street like Powder House Boulevard. It's wide enough. It's wide enough. 10 foot is wide enough. Okay. All right, so there is also a fourth option, option D, which is another option that would require converting one of the parking lanes into a travel lane. However, this option splits the bike lanes so that there's one on one side against parking again with that buffer, and then there's another one on the other side of the street, which is more typical of what you would see in Somerville on a street like Somerville Ave, for example. This option is more of a traditional design, and intersection operations are generally a little bit more simplified in this option, because if bikes and cars are coming on the same side of the street, it's a little bit more easy for everyone to understand where everyone should be, who has the right of way. The one thing I'd like to note about this option is that there may be enough room to get flex posts in here as well and make both sides protected. However, if this is something that the community wanted to pursue, the city would need to do a little bit more investigating to determine if that was a possibility. So that could just be a bike lane against against a travel lane, or there could be some flex posts there as well. So we've already heard a lot from the community on this issue. A number of concerns have been raised. There are a few things that continue to crop up as we are going through this process. One is operations at our neighborhood institutions.
I'd like to add an important neighborhood institution that you don't have listed there, and that would be the Open Center for Children, which is located in the Niagara Presbyterian Church.
Right, I'm sorry.
Left off that and left off the sheet.
I'm sorry, I was considering the church as one building, so I apologize for that. So I guess I should say there is the Open Center for Children as well, and there's the Nave Gallery, which is also located in the church building. So there's Doherty's Funeral Home, there's the Presbyterian Church, Nave Gallery, Open Center, and then the West Somerville Neighborhood School as well. There's also a great amount of concern for parking under special circumstances, such as things like street sweeping, snow emergencies, and Tufts events when either the amount of parking is reduced or the amount of vehicles that park on Powder House Boulevard is higher than normal. So the city is also thinking through whether or not there are some viable parking mitigation strategies if parking were to be removed to help ease the burden. I'll talk through a few of these examples. So one would be creating time-limited parking for for users of the church, the funeral home, the Open Center as well, even West Somerville Neighborhood School. So for example, there around Somerville, you'll see that there's a lot of 2-hour parking, there's metered parking, 30-minute pickup drop-off, they're all different kinds. Powder House, with the exception of right outside the school, is exclusively residential permit parking only. So during the day when there are less people parked on Powder House, what could potentially be done is to have regulations that say between 7 and 5, 9 and 4. It accommodates the church, the funeral home, so that they can meet their needs and people don't park in those spaces during the day, and that residents come back, use those spaces at night, and it just matches the demand a little bit better. Another option would be to not issue more permits than there are parking spaces on Powder House Boulevard. So we would go out, we would count the total number of spaces on the boulevard, and then everyone that currently has a permit would continue to have a permit. However, anyone new, if we were at the threshold of how many permits we would theoretically allow, anyone new would have to go on a waiting list. So they wouldn't be able to get a permit until someone else moved out or moved to a different part of the city, and then that person could get that permit and could have that. Sorry, sir, did you have a...
So the wait is in 2 sections, from 3 to 5 and 7 and 9. You got to go up and move your car. Does that make sense?
Sorry?
I said the wait is in 2 sessions. It's from 3 to 5 and 7 to 9. Someone in a grieving family has to go move their car because they don't have someone with a permit.
So you're raising a concern about one of these mitigation strategies and how it would actually work. There are going to be a lot of concerns and suggestions, and I like, hey, do it this way, don't do it that way, which is what we want. I'm going to let George answer, and then I'm going to let Adam get.
We don't ticket during wakes and funerals, and we're not proposing to change that. I just want to make that very clear, regardless of anything else that happens here.
Thank you. Helpful.
Yeah. Sorry, that was also just a theoretical example. We don't know what any of these regulations would look like, and we would be working with these partners to make sure that it matched.
I see people have hands going up. We're not starting comments or questions until he gets through it because you haven't heard everything. So let's do so hold your question, jot it down so you don't forget, and then we'll come back to them.
So there are a few more options here that I want to talk through. One option would be to paint parking tees. So for those of you who don't know what those are, it would be every 18 to 20 feet, which is about the length of a car, allowing for a couple feet on either end to maneuver out of the parking space. You would just put a little bit of a 2-foot hash mark. So it more clearly defines where each space is on the street so that people park more efficiently. You don't have one person parking in what could be 2 spots, and it makes it a little bit easier to make sure that the parking on the street is utilized most effectively. There are also some educational type pieces which are encouraging people to use their driveways if they have access to one versus staying out on the street when they have access to that driveway, incentivizing more tenants to come without bringing a car. There could also be an option where we work with Tufts to gain access to off-street parking for snow emergencies and large events. That would obviously be contingent on Tufts accepting that, but we're just trying to throw out ideas right now and see what people are receptive to, and then we would go from there. None of this is set in stone. We're just putting ideas out there and seeing what people would be interested in. Something else that we could look into is adjusting the street sweeping schedule so that some key streets, such as maybe Curtis or Packard, could operate with parking on both sides when the boulevard didn't have parking on it. And then the key thing to keep in mind here is that we could potentially pilot any of the above strategies to see how they work before committing permanently to any of them. I'm hoping that comes across well to everyone, that throughout this process and sort of everything the city's been doing, we're really open to trying things and seeing how they work before committing to anything full-time.
So we're going to take just a couple minutes for clarifying questions. I know it's really tempting to use this time to start to share your opinion on this. I want to ask you to hold that. I know it's hard. And just ask clarifying questions so everyone can make sure that they understand the ideas that were put out. And I will say these are a set of ideas. Obviously, some of them are not that fully formed yet, right? So this is the opportunity. So if you have a clarifying question, raise your hand. I'm going to start over here. I'm going to go this way. And then we're going to switch and have some conversations together. Yes, Brian, can you run a mic? Thank you. Yeah.
Could you just clarify what the travel lane and parking lane and bike lane widths on each of those cross sections will be?
Sure. So under what we're calling the existing condition, or option A, we used 7-foot parking lane widths, which is sort of the standard around Somerville, for all 4 options. This is today, and it's a 13-foot wide travel lane in both directions. In option B, the parking lanes are still 7 feet. However, there's also a 6-foot bike lane, and then the travel lanes are narrowed down to 10 feet in either direction. In option C, the travel lanes are also 10 feet. Parking lane is still 7 feet, and then there are 2 5-foot bike lanes, so it's really one 10-foot bike lane and then a 3-foot buffer. And then in option D, it's a 5-foot bike lane, 2 10-foot travel lanes, a 7-foot parking lane again, and then that 3-foot buffer with another 5-foot bike lane as well.
Can you go back to option D? On the other paper, it says that the bike lane will be on one side of the street, part of the way, and then switch over. Why is that?
So
Explain the switch and then we're going to go.
Repeat the question, please.
yes. So the question was, why would the bike lane switch sides? Generally, it's safer if you have to pick one side of a street to have a dedicated bike facility on. It's in the uphill direction when cyclists are traveling slower, because more cars tend to pass them in that scenario. There's not a huge hill on Powder House, but it is up towards Packard in both directions, so we would have it on that side as you're approaching Packard.
Does it switch in C?
Oh, is that about the switching? Yeah.
Yeah, does it switch in C as well? Option C?
No.
Because there are full bike lanes in both directions in
Yeah.
C and D.
So
it doesn't need the switch.
which direction are we looking at there?
This would be, so because there are no curb cuts at Tufts Field, this would be looking from Powder House Circle towards Alewife Brook Parkway at any point. So it would be on the Tufts.
If you're doing a two-way bike lane, you always put it on the side that has the fewer driveways because it's safer that way.
Less opportunity for conflicts.
Yeah.
So Brian, back in the back corner with the white sweater. Thank you.
Also, if you've ever ridden on Summer Street.
Hi. One of the events that you did not list was all the soccer that goes on every spring and fall.
Right.
And it's not kids just from this neighborhood who are playing at those fields. It's kids across the city. So we need parking on the Boulevard. And also, you said that one of the options possibly would be for sticker limits, resident sticker limits. Would you give priority to actual Somerville residents and not Tufts students, because they would eat up a ton of that limit?
It would be just for residents of Powder House Boulevard, actually. There are a couple ways that you could do something like that, but what we would do is that if you live on Powder House itself, we would cap that at a certain number of spaces depending on how many spaces are on the boulevard, and then if you wanted to then park on Powder House and you're on a waiting list, you'd have to wait until someone else moved off.
Where do you get attendance spot?
All right, we're gonna put your hand up if you have a clarifying question. I'm gonna kind of sweep the room. Yes, the white shirt.
Oh, I can just recap. What are the costs associated with each option, and what are the funding sources?
Say it again, sir. So,
yeah, I'm just curious what the costs are associated with each option and also the funding source.
Sure. So this can all be covered under the current resurfacing contract, the repaving contract that the city has provided. That's a $3 million contract, and even all of these options would be somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000, which is really a drop in the bucket compared to the total contract. So cost really isn't a factor here for any of the options.
Hi, I actually have a question about this option C right here. So kind of looking at it from the left to the right, car 1, 2, 3. My question is about the logic of having the parking be car number 3. So the parking lane being right next to the bike lane, and just kind of why it would be there as opposed to it being on the other side of the street where that first car is, so then the 2 cars in the middle are the travel lanes.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So this is what we call a parking protected bike lane, and it actually, because occasionally people will get out on the passenger side and they'd be expected to look, which also has to happen when there's a bike lane on the other side. This basically provides an extra barrier of steel for bicyclists. So if there are cars parked there, they don't necessarily have to worry about a car veering off to the right, and it just provides a safer experience for bicyclists. You could potentially put it on the other side of the street as well. And in fact, there is an option where you switch the sides of the street. So maybe for part of it, you have it here, maybe you move it to the other side. However, on Powder House, there is significantly more parking on this side of the street. So you would have more parking retained if you kept the parking on that side.
I'm just wondering, from the perspective of the people who live in these houses, I have a car in my driveway and I back out of the driveway onto the street. So I'm wondering just what the safety is like backing up into, the bike lane and then the parking lane and then trying to get on the street, and if the cars can see you traveling versus being on the other side of the street.
Right. No, another good question. It would probably be similar to what you're experiencing today in terms of visibility. You would have to check first to make sure that there are no bikes coming, but given that, you would then back out and you would have similar visibility across the parking lane. Actually, if you're coming out on the other side, though, you would no longer have to worry about parked cars if you're on the even side of the street, and you'd have much better visibility coming if you're backing out of your driveway on that
So
side.
let's go to the woman in the blue.
Hi, thank you. Clarifying question from the perspective of a parent with a preschooler in the open center, which is a daycare in the church. We talked a lot about how this impacts parking. I'm very concerned about the unintended pedestrian impacts this has. Up and drop off for daycare is precarious as it is. Has any of these plans been vetted against or analyzed against potential pedestrian impacts? Because I don't, honestly, getting a 3-year-old out of a child and trying to navigate all of this feels very challenging. And I think it's a recipe for a very bad situation. So I hope some consideration has either been given to that or will be given to that. Getting out of a car in that scenario, either on the driver's side or the passenger side, you're either having oncoming traffic coming this way with a narrow traffic lane. I assume there's a 3 feet protection between you and the bikers.
Yes.
But opening that door and trying to get a child out, close the door, cross 2 different lanes of traffic, with a 3-year-old, I don't know if anyone has a 3-year-old, it's challenging. So has there been consideration to the safety impacts on the pedestrian, particularly with the small children in that area? Thank you.
Yeah, and it's something that we can continue to think about. The benefit of this option is that even if you open your car door into that 3-foot lane, the bike lane is still 10 feet wide, so you have some buffer there. It's pretty unlikely, at least at this point in time, that there's going to be a continuous flow of bikes going back and forth, so anyone that would approach would be able to veer around, and they still have a considerable amount of room and would hopefully be considerate. Yeah.
And point taken and captured as a question to look into. Thank you. In the back in red, Brian, can you get over there? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Francis Lichtenberger at 44 Powder House Boulevard. Have you taken into consideration the flooding that happens there? It seems to have gotten worse since the road's been done, and so you can't park, even the Leonard Street intersection is underwater very, very often when it rains. And so there's no parking anywhere along Powder House Boulevard there when it rains on either side of the street. And that's been happening much more frequently. In fact, if you look at our house on Google Maps, you can see the Google map car creating a big wave going down Powder House Boulevard.
I have seen that.
You could probably surf that thing.
Yep. Yeah, no, and that's something that we'll definitely need to continue to monitor because that isn't necessarily a common situation across the city. However, if that is something that happens frequently enough, we will have to keep that in mind, certainly.
Actually, Adam, I'll answer that also.
Oh, right, we also have an engineer in the room.
I'm Brian Polstoid. I haven't had to speak this evening yet. I'm one of the city engineers, and I'm who you end up talking to if you have a flooding concern. One of the many conversations I have. But yes, we do have a handful of flooding concerns, and we are aware of this one. And I have been working with Water and Sewer to find out what the particular cause of it is and why it appears to be happening more now than it had been. So yes, we are looking into that specifically.
Thank you. So we're gonna take 2 more clarifying questions and shift to the next part. Fellow in the white right there. And if there's
Yeah, my name is Tom. The reason I came here tonight was I was hearing rumors, and hopefully from all these options, I don't think it's on the planning board, that people on the boulevard would not be able to park on the boulevard. Either half of them or the whole entire, and I can just see a wave of cars coming onto the side streets, which would create more problems than you want to deal with. But am I right in assuming that cars will not be forced, that are parking now on the boulevard now, will not be allowed to park there? You haven't mentioned that at all in the options, so they're not on the options, so I assume that I'm right in saying that. Can you confirm that either way? Are you thinking about it?
I want to be 100% clear here, okay, and confirm exactly what's going on if we haven't been clear in the way we presented this. Option A and Option B do not change any parking situations on the boulevard from essentially the way they've existed in the past. Option B does narrow the travel lanes, but doesn't change the parking situation. To do Option C, which does this two-sided bike lane, it would require eliminating parking on one side of the boulevard. The side.
Is that written down on the, I don't know if I've read that.
If you look
It
at
is written down
here,
there.
this is the drive lane. There's no parking
Now, what do those-
on the even side here.
Where do those cars go?
Well, so
they're clogged as it is.
So okay, just for a moment here, I think we're moving past a clarifying question here. This is part of the conversation I want you all to have. Option D, which puts a bike lane on each side, also removes one side of parking in order to accomplish that.
We don't need to remove cars. We park it the way it is.
So all of the discussions of the ideas and suggestions that Adam was making to address parking are based upon the concept of if option C or D became the preferred option, what could we do to address the impacts that would occur? We're not at that point yet. What we're doing here tonight is we're suggesting that where we see the opportunity, when the chance comes out in the city to provide better pedestrian access and better bicycle access like we do when we repave a street, we usually go through the exercise of trying to determine what the best way is to address a street for all users and what makes the most sense.
So what was the bicycle lane created for? What was the bicycle path created for? Yes.
So why put in a bike lane? So let me take a step way back here and try to answer the basic question of why put in a bike lane. In a number of places in the city, we're seeing a lot more interest in biking. We're seeing a lot more people who bicycle to get to work every day. We see a lot more people who bicycle to get around town every day. So one of the reasons why, may I finish, please? One moment. Okay, I would like to answer the woman's question, if I might.
She asked if why was a bike path.
She asked why add a bike lane on Powder House Boulevard, and I would like to be able to answer that question.
She asked why bike
What
They're
bike
referring
path?
to the community path.
The Minuteman bike path doesn't cover this neighborhood, though.
Yeah.
So,
I'm through the city into Davis Square.
okay, so
Rose Darlington, who came or Darlington?
That's not the design piece under consideration here. Right?
So when we have the opportunity to look at providing a neighborhood with better bicycle infrastructure and the opportunity to make it safer, which when we do, by the way, typically causes more people to use bike lanes and therefore more people to bike and therefore fewer people to drive. And I know there may be people in the room, I happen to probably be one of them, who would choose driving over biking 99 out of 100 times, but at the same time, If we're allowing the opportunity for more people to bike, it allows more people more options to get around the city and more chances to be able to get from where they're going. So,
And they need to follow the rules of the road.
Okay, guys. So we're gonna move into the next piece. I know. Here's the deal. I know there are a lot of you with hands up, and I apologize. I want to hear from all of you. And of the 120 people in the room, I have not counted. I have no idea how many of you there are in here. 25 of you would get to make a comment, or 30 of you. And we want to hear from everybody. So I want to say two things and tell you what we're going to do next. And I know for some of you, you're like feeling bottled up. And I apologize. I hate that feeling also. I want to. We're not doing. We're not. Right.
You take parking away from one side. Where are the people going to park? And if you limit the permits, you have a house and you're renting. What do you tell the people?
So here's the invitation. The invitation to you guys and to anyone who cares. So tonight.
You want us as landlords, okay, homeowners, that we have tenants. To tell them, okay?
They can't park.
I want you to help problem solve.
Can we get security here? We can move on.
All right. Here's what's happening next. We are asking you to help solve the problem, right?
Shut up! Give her a chance, man. You talked too long. Sit down.
Guys, there are a lot. Here's the task. And for anyone, I'm really sorry, this is hard. And I actually want to like stand up taller, but this is as tall as I am. Here's the task. You all have a handout. So everyone, especially if people start leaving, which I know happens in any evening meeting, please be sure to jot down your thoughts and turn them in on the desk as you walk out the door. I just want to say that. There's information, all this sort of queued up. What do you think? What do you want to see happen? This is the city inviting you to share your thoughts. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to ask you, and I'm going to ask the city staff to hand out these instructions now, to take 20 minutes. It's not very long. 20 minutes to talk with the people at your table. Okay? So we all live our own. Listen to me for a sec. I know it's hard to listen. I will let you ask if it's a clarifying question, I will let you ask it, but I'm going to tell you first. Can I ask people to be quiet just for a sec so other people can hear? We are going to pass out some small group instructions. We're going to ask you to talk in groups of 5 or 6 people about one question. And that's like, how does this issue affect you? Why does it matter to you? And to try to listen to each other. Like, it matters to you, it matters to you, it matters to you. Like, it matters to everybody in this room so much, right? That's why this feels like this. That's why people are freaked out and overwhelmed. So, well, here's...
Yelling shut up, is that okay? Why is he still here? So does everybody get to yell now? Is that what we get to do?
He's sitting.
Yeah, he's yelling.
Okay,
So go
guys.
yell at him. Don't tell me anything. You could just be quiet and look that way.
I have a question. I want to ask this
We're
question.
gonna try
I'd like
this.
to know who in the room.
You
is
kind of
from
lose the
Somerville
opportunity
Bicycle Committee.
if you talk over your friends and neighbors and don't give them this chance. Here's where we are. Imagine you're talking to your partner. You can have 30 seconds to ask your question.
My question is, how did the city gather the data to make a determination that a bike lane should even be considered in this area in the first place? How does the city know?
How many places was that there?
How does the city know? I don't need a microphone. How does the city know? How did it count the bike usage? The bikes are not registered in this city. I drive the Boulevard every morning. I see no bikes on the Boulevard.
I
don't see the need.
So,
That's why I want to know
may I-
where the information comes from.
The question that you asked, which is, why did we make the determination to consider bikes as part of what we're doing on this road?
I want to know how you make a count of bikes that are in the city that potentially would use this area.
So I don't, so
How many bicyclists ride on Powder House? It's really simple.
So, hold on 1 minute, just a second.
People are swimming across.
Pretty much do.
No, you
Do
don't.
it out of necessity.
Right.
Okay, it's based on necessity.
You're gonna go home and think
If
about
one
that
person
analogy
rides
for a
bike,
while, all right? You're gonna go home and think about that analogy for a
so
while.
will you.
I've heard your question. May I try to answer it now? Okay. There are, so I'm sorry. The question was essentially, how many bikes will use this? How do we know bikes will use this? And why would we set up a system where we would take space that is being used by other users and put it towards bikes if we don't know if bikes are going to use it? Is that a fair enough assessment of the question? Okay, so I will try my best to answer that question, and I will begin by saying we are proposing 4 options here, one of which changes nothing. And all we are saying is when we pave streets, we have an increasing interest in bicycling in the city. We have more people who are doing it. Adam and I don't have an exact count out here. We can look. We do count bikes twice a year throughout the city. We see some pretty substantial bike counts in a number of places. The numbers tend to go up a lot when we build safer bike lanes for people, because people tend to be more comfortable biking on those streets when we do. So it's not always just the current count that matters. It's the possibility that if we do this, we are able to address those issues. I will also say that even like the pedestrian solution, some of the bike solutions can be done with paint and can be done, and you can say, okay, if a year from now nobody's using it, we can paint it back a different way. But we have been in a situation where we've said when we're painting streets, we will look at the possibility of sharing streets amongst different users. Now, that may not be a viable answer for people who drive everywhere, who park on the street, who want to use the street in certain ways and don't want to use the street for bicycling, and that's why we're here. We're here to understand what people would like. You know, street width in Somerville is a rare and limited thing. Over here we have, you know, when you basically look at it, we have, 39 feet to work with. And so we can allocate that 39 feet a bunch of different ways. No, so...
He said they count twice a year. Every
No,
year.
he didn't say what is twice a year. He didn't say what methodology they used to count.
All right, so this is, ma'am, so this is the question to all of you. This is where they are in this process. They want to know what they need to learn more about. So this is your chance because, wait, step down, step aside. This is your chance to flag each of those questions. What do you want to know? What do you want the city to research? These are 4 options with some parking mitigation. They're not the only ones. What are they, what other good ideas do you have? And so we can keep having this with just one person, but I would like to ask you to shift to the next piece if we can. Otherwise, we'll just keep doing this. I'm going to ask you we're going to stop this large group discussion because I know feelings are high and we want to let you hear from each other, which means there are instructions going around. We're asking you to take 2 minutes each and share with the people at the table. For those of you standing, feel free to find 5 or 6 people to chat with. We're going to take 20 minutes and do this and then come back together. We'll walk around and help answer questions. Thank you all so much for all of that. I think you were doing it, but if you have not, put some of your thoughts down on the paper that there's a box right outside the door, which is where you'll put that as you walk out. Please do it now while this is all fresh in your minds. I want to note on your meeting agenda at the bottom is a link to a survey. That's the same thing as this handout you just filled out, and it's a chance for all the many people who couldn't come to the meeting tonight but who care about this issue to share their thoughts on these same questions. So tell your friends and neighbors. We're taking input that way for the next 2 weeks because this is all quite a quick time frame. So we can, I want to acknowledge that the meeting's supposed to have ended at 8:30, so we can take about 10 more minutes if we want for key things you heard, things you thought were kind of cool that someone suggested, something you learned. If this starts going down, I'm fighting for some perspective I have, I will wrap the meeting. So this is really like insights, something you learned, something you want to share with the big group just for 10 minutes. And I know some people need to leave, and that is totally fine. I'm going to come over here, and we'll just share a few thoughts, kind of quick, what you heard, what you learned.
Thank you. Hi. I don't like microphones. Hello? I'd rather just yell. Can you hear me? I'm being videoed. Oh, that's why. Sorry, I don't like a mic. So I just had like a really quick question. So, and you had said that if, this is online, like as well, and like people can write down like what their thoughts are, like their strongest and least favored. So is that like a vote? Because who makes the final decision? Because I just kind of feel like that everybody kind of came here to get mad at each other, but then are you guys just going to go back and decide on your own, and it doesn't really matter what any of us think? I'm just wondering.
What's the process for next steps? Who's taking this?
So the first thing I will say is that we don't do that. I hope folks who have been involved in anything, I will share with you that I spent the first 3 years of my time working in Somerville, spending evening meetings in this room, discussing what the future use of the Powder House School, and I think anyone who was involved in that project with us would say that we certainly didn't just go back and do what we wanted. We spent a long time trying to figure out what to do. I'd rather not spend a long time trying to figure out what we do, but I would like to try to find where there's some opportunity for consensus, where there's some ideas, where people are coming together on ideas and see where they are. So what I'll share with you is this. We're going to collect all this information. Some people are going to write on this form that they want more information, more data, more analysis. If they do and it's something we can do, we will do that as well. I do expect we will come back to the community and do another meeting in the near future. Can't quite tell you when. It sort of depends upon how much information you all give us and what we have to do with all of it. But once we have all that, we'll come back and we'll share where we are and what's going on from there. At the end of the day, somewhere in City Hall, we have to make a decision on where to put a line on a road. But we really are going to do our best to hear out all the ideas we have before we make that determination.
All right, so again, this is like final high-level observations, things you learned.
Hi, my name is Alex Anderson. Based on what I look like, you might assume I'm a biker. So I took an opportunity to mingle, because that was the purpose of the activity. So I came over to this table and met with Jim, which was great. I think one of the things that I learned is a lot of our concerns are identical. We're both concerned about parking. We're concerned about different parking, but we're concerned about parking. I'm concerned about parking on Powder House. Jim is concerned about parking on side streets. There's a solution there, because the concerns that Jim has is tied to parking on side streets related to a free issuing of permits that isn't actually tied to people living in homes in side streets. And my concerns about Powder House parking is that I can't bike safely, and there's an opportunity there to figure out a way to improve the permitting process to make the parking work, not just on Powder House, but in the surrounding neighborhoods that works for Jim and works for me. And so I think there's a big opportunity to actually take advantage. I was scared to come over here. We were on other sides of the room earlier, and Jim's been here forever. No, not forever, sorry. But you might assume that we're from very different sides of the position here, and I think our interests actually align where we can find a workable solution. And it's not just about we're losing parking for a bike lane. There's a better distribution of resources in the neighborhood, and I think this was a great process, so thanks.
I'd say 2 seconds, give me 5. Wouldn't it be nice, rather than having the 5 people making decisions about the people that live in Ward 7, have the people vote in Ward 7 what they want? We know a lot than you do.
Thank you. Other things you heard or that struck you from talking to your friends and neighbors?
the sidewalks are very wide here, and there's also a lot of grass between the sidewalk and the road, and some of that also has trees. But is there a way to narrow the sidewalk safely and put a bike lane between the trees and the sidewalk, and then also, but have more bike lanes and not lose parking, but lose the sidewalk?
Expanding the pie. Okay.
No cutting down trees. Oh, really? How do you do that?
Okay, any other kind of high-level observations or questions or comments? Yes.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Carrie. I live on Raymond Ave, like right there. One concern I heard from a driver in the area that I actually realized, oh, we kind of align more on this than I thought. I'm a cyclist in the area, was that she had a concern about, when I'm driving along and there are cyclists sharing the lane with me, it's really scary. They're close to the car, they're swerving in and out. And I actually realized, having some protected bike lanes there will make driving easier and safer and less stressful for cars as well as bikes, because you're not worrying about sharing the same lane.
Thank you.
Yeah, I spoke last week about this here, people probably heard me, and I was talking about, number one, we could talk about Doherty's up the street here, which every family that comes from Somerville, past and present, that's the only place to go. Like I said last week, it's not like they're going to another restaurant. They're the only ones, and I know in my family, I use it more than I want, and we have a large family, and we took the Boulevard on both sides, and I wouldn't want to have people say, drop them off at the door, And some of the other things here, and then you go right down the street here, like I said, the church, the daycare, and we got this school and all the parents here with their kids who got to drop them off every day. I come by here just today and I saw both sides of the Boulevard. And the other thing, some of your plans there, I got 5 kids, 9 grandkids. You tell me you take all the parking away on the Boulevard, I'm not going to park in my driveway because I have people come visit me. Where are they going to park? I'm going to tell them to go to Tail Square. So these things ain't going to work, and these other things about these parking here, or the Tufts thing. I have 4 business parking Tufts on my street, Little Tail Avenue right now. They're not going to give you anything. I go up and I parked on Whitfield. They gave me a ticket because I had one of those red, blue, white signs. I thought I had a resident park and I could park there. The cop says, no, you're not allowed. So there's a lot of things here in those 5, whatever those things you got, that aren't going to work. Okay, so and it's just one more point I'd just like to say is where do they go? Route 16. No one goes down there. It's where you're going to go. You can't ride on Route 16. Since I retired, I've done 1,000 laps around the Boulevard here, and I don't see that many bikes. And I don't care if they want it just for recreation, but I don't see the bike. Where are they coming from? Arlington. So.
Thank you. We're going to do the hands I see. There are kind of 4 in a row, and then we're going to wrap for the evening and hope people keep having these conversations.
Hit the button? No. My name's Sean Lyons. I'm his son. I lived here 35 years. That's how old I am. I never thought that I'd ever say I'd want to move out of Somerville. But the traffic in this city is so bad, it makes you not want to be here. And they keep saying data. Data this, data that. You don't need data when you drive around the city and you see the traffic jams everywhere. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that this is even getting brought up as a subject. I'm not trying not to get heated about it. It's just, if you can't see, you bikers out there. I have a bike. I drive recreationally with me and my girl, my fiance. We drive around, get exercise. I've never used a bike lane in my life, ever. I'm still here. Maybe it's a miracle. I don't know. I pay attention. I use common sense, right? And if you can't see that the city has bent over backwards to make bike lanes for you guys to have safe roads in this city, then you're blind and you're just not willing to compromise at all. You don't need every street. We're going to start. You guys want to start putting tolls next, to slow traffic down even more? You have plenty of bike lanes. Use your head. Look before you cross the street. Use some common sense. Put the data away and live with your experience in life. Simple. That's it.
Allison Donovan, use common sense.
Also, I've been on the Somerville Fire Department for over 10 years now, right?
You feel really safe.
Emergency, yeah, be a wise Alec there. I'm not gonna stoop to your level.
That's typical.
10 and a half years, the traffic has never been so bad. Guess what? Your emergency response gets delayed. And one of the big reasons is because lanes that were 2 lanes of traffic are now 1, and cars are backed up, and emergency response vehicles, firefighters and police cannot respond in the proper time. Keep that in mind.
We're going to do a couple more. I need to talk about that. It's a data point, and the chief of the fire department shared with us data yesterday, and during all this construction, they have been getting to their calls on time, if not a little bit faster. So just want to we have it in writing, so it's in writing. If you want to look at the meeting of the minutes of the finance committee, you can see that there's information there. I have to correct it because it was given to us by the chief of the fire department. And
One other question though, right? With the city planners, right, maybe not using common sense, we have all these bridges closed, right? What about maybe closing one bridge, finishing it, then starting another bridge?
Bridges. We're not going
We have a high school education here, people, you know?
It is so
Common
much.
sense.
We are dealing with a lot right now. I'm going to take 3 final comments or reflections from the small group conversation and wrap so that people can go home to their families.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I'm just gonna say it plain and simple. There's already bike lanes on Broadway, which is like 100 feet across, so we don't need them on Powder House Blvd. The whole beginning section of this was about traffic issues, and you want to create more traffic and have people driving around in circles looking for parking spots because we just took away half of them that are in the neighborhood. And he already said it, so I'm not going to say it again, but Doherty's Funeral Home has been there forever. And funeral processions, how are you going to get a start? You're going to drop your grandmother off at the door, as some people have already said. You can't start a funeral procession having people coming from Electric Ave and Osby Road and down here on Mason. They need to be right next to the funeral home. And if you think, oh, they should move for the neighborhood, well, then you suck.
We're going to do 2 final reflections, observations.
Yeah, I just have one question. I mean, my question is, I own a house on Powder House Blvd, and I talked to the gentleman there. We're talking about restricting parking, either if you went through 2 bike lanes, issuing, limiting the number of permits, or, well, where are my tenants going to park? I don't have a driveway where they can park. So is the city going to say to me and everybody else that owns a house on the boulevard, hey, that's your problem. Guess you're not going to get your rent anymore. Or maybe I call one of the developers up to keep calling me, sell my house for $1.5 million and get out of the city. I mean, I like the city, but I do need parking, and I cannot have my tenants. Just it's not feasible. And I'll close it saying, I think if the city tries to do that, one street in the whole city, I think they'll be sued, and I think they'll lose, because you can't restrict parking on one street in the whole city.
All right.
There we go. All right, we're going to wrap up so that we can wrap up. That's why we're wrapping up. Please make sure you have filled out your forms. Katyana wants me to do something. What do you want me to do? There's a woman. She had her hand up for a long time. I feel like I already wrapped it. I'm very sorry. I want to thank everyone for coming. I know this is mixed and hard, and we will be back in touch. The city will be back in touch about this very soon.
Nice to meet you guys.